Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to do my May wrap up and sort of a life update. A little bit of explanation as to why I haven't been posting as many videos as of late. So let's start with the life update portion of this. And the reason why I've been absent from BookTube and I haven't been keeping up with my own videos or being able to watch many of your videos is because my daughter just graduated from high school. So I will put a picture up here probably of her graduating, and it was very exciting and also emotional for me. It's my youngest child graduating, so end of an era in my life here of being a primary person rearing a child, not primary in that my husband didn't help, but like primary responsibility, I guess, being child rearing is really and truly done now. And it's such a huge difference to think about, for the last over 20 years. I've been totally focused on my kids and their needs and what they're up to, and now it's just being responsible for myself again and my husband and our house and dog and all that. But we aren't tied to the school schedule anymore, or the school calendar, or the sports calendar, or any of that stuff. So it's a big change. Anyway, for those of you who have been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you who don't have kids are going, what the heck is she blathering on about? But it was a big deal for us. And so for the last over 5 days, we've been completely swamped with end of senior year and graduation festivities. So I'm happy to be back and filming a video, and I hope to be back to being able to watch lots of BookTube videos again. And I'm sorry if I've missed something that you've made. I've been trying to watch the backlog, but there's just no way I'm going to get through it all. So know that I am sometimes watching and not commenting, and some of them I'm just going to have to say I can't do everything, right? But on to what I have read in the month of May. I've done a few little wrap-ups over the month, so I don't have that many books left to talk about that I haven't already talked about previously, but I did read a total of 12 books in the month of May, which was great. And a lot of the books I read fit into the Asian readathon reading theme. So I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books out of the 12 were Asian authors or themes that would fit the Asian readathon. Basically that theme for the month. So I feel pretty happy about that. Plus I got a bunch of other reading done. So it was a good reading month. The books, I'm going to talk about the books that I have not already talked about, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention that as far as reducing my physical TBR pile, I did not do very well at all in the month of May because I brought 8 books into my home, and I removed 8 books from my physical TBR either by reading them or by unhauling them. And so May was a complete wash as far as being able to get any books off my physical TBR. And as we all know, I'm trying to reduce that number so that I have, under 100 books on my physical TBR. And in order to do that, based on what the numbers were at the beginning of the year, I need to, on average, have a minus of at least 4 books a month. And so it was a big fat 0 for May. I've got to do better in June if I want to reach my goal. So the books that I have finished and not talked about since the last time I've done a reading update. The first one is Daisy Jones and the Six by Jenkins Reid. This book has been everywhere recently, but it's contemporary. Well, not really contemporary. It takes place in, it follows a rock band in the 70s in the United States. And the book is told as if it were an oral history with interviews with the different band members and people involved with managing the band and band family members and other folks that were attached to that band. I listened to this book on audio. Each of the different people, the characters in the book, have their own narrator, so it's a full cast audio. It was fantastically produced. It's absolutely amazing. Highly, highly entertaining. It's like listening to a movie, basically, in your head. And I really enjoyed that experience. I don't know if I would have even liked the book as well as a physical book as I did. That the audio narration just lent so much to the level of enjoyment I had for that book. It really was a fantastic book. And the only caveat I will say to my enjoyment of the book was the lead male singer in the band, Billy. His wife, Camille, was so perfect as to be unbelievable. Like, I do not believe that any woman would have handled the events in that book the way that she did. Let's just put it that way. I got to the end and I was like, yeah, no, like, what is she, an angel put down here on earth? I could not buy her character, but it didn't lessen my enjoyment of the story. So that's just my own personal opinion on that one. The next book I completed was another audiobook, and this one was All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is a science fiction novella. It's book 1 in the Murderbot series, where we're following the main character is a so-called murder bot. So he is not human. He is a robot or an artificial intelligence in a sort of human-like body, but he has all kinds of enhancements that allow him to provide security for people, groups, as they go out and about in these different areas of space to do their work. In this particular installment, he is assigned to a research team who are off assessing an uninhabited planet to see if it's, ripe for colonization, basically. And the whole expedition goes horribly awry, and he has to try to get his clients out of this situation without them dying. And I loved it. It was so entertaining. The AI character, the Murderbot, is like totally obsessed with media and spends all of his downtime, or its downtime, playing TV shows and other media in his virtual feed, and doesn't want to interact with any of the people, and is horrified at any emotions being displayed around him, or it, I should say. I keep automatically using him, and I shouldn't. And it's just so much fun. It's just a really fun read. If you are not sure about sci-fi, this is the kind of book that I think you should give a try to, because the science fiction part of it is not like super hard to understand. This isn't hard sci-fi at all. This is just basically an adventure story with a character who is not human but appears to be somewhat human, and so the humans in the story react to it like it's a human, but it's not. So that leads to a lot of funny misunderstandings, and there's lots of action, so the story moves along really quickly. It's super fun read. Definitely recommend that one. The next book I completed was an ebook from Scribd. I should say the last 2 books were also from Scribd. I've been obsessed with Scribd, obviously, as you can tell. The next one I read was an ebook from Scribd as well, and that is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This contemporary fiction novel was translated from the Japanese. It's been very seen a lot on BookTube in the last year or so, I would say, where we're following a woman in her 30s who works as a convenience store clerk. That's the only job that she's ever had, and it's a job that she feels comfortable with because she understands the rules of engagement. So she knows exactly how she's expected to behave. She knows exactly what she's expected to do at any given moment, and she really needs that structure in her life. She is not able to sort of function in society in a quote-unquote normal way, and she recognizes that about herself, and so she's very comfortable in this convenience store job, but the people around her are not comfortable with the idea that she hasn't moved on. She hasn't gone on for college, she hasn't gotten married, she hasn't had a baby. All of those specific societal sort of quote unquote norms she hasn't met. And it's all about how she deals with other people's expectation of herself and how she tries to deal with that. It's a very quirky book. The main character is not particularly likable, nor is she meant to be, nor would she want to be likable to you. Like, that's not her goal in life, to be likable to people. And I found that quite interesting. I really like a character like that. Specifically, I like women who are written like that, who have not bought into like having to meet societal norms. And I never can remember character names, so I apologize. But when the main character here in Convenience Store Woman does try to meet societal norms, like, it all goes to hell. So yes, it was Convenience Store Woman was a quick read, and I would, another one that I would recommend if you like a quirky character, a quirky story. I will say after reading all of the Asian themed books this past month, there definitely is a different tone to a lot of Asian fiction than the tone you will find in American fiction. And I find that really interesting. There's like almost a standoffish quality to the Asian fiction that I read. You know, there's almost a barrier between the reader and the characters where it's hard to form an emotional connection with the characters a lot of times. Doesn't mean that you don't have empathy for them or that you're not interested in them or their story. It's just a matter of some distance, I guess. There's some emotional distance between you and the characters. So that's just a different thing that I notice. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just different. And then the last book that I finished in the month of May is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. I buddy read this with Lindsay over at Lindsay's Book Life, and we really had a great experience buddy reading this book. I think it absolutely enhanced my understanding and enjoyment of this story, being able to bounce ideas off Lindsay. She had thought of points and themes and different elements of this story that I did not pick up on, and that really gave me a broader understanding of what Ozeki was trying to do. Particularly, I am not a particularly I don't pick up sometimes on literary devices in my fiction because I often am reading the story and not really paying attention to structure or some other kind of device that an author is trying to use. But this book is very much a metafictional story where one of the main characters is Ruth, who is an author, very much, I think, based on Ruth Ozeki, our actual author. And the dual timeline in this story is of a teenage Japanese girl who is writing a diary to some person who's going to read the diary, some unknown person who's going to read the diary in the future. And our second storyline is Ruth, the author, who has found this said diary and is trying to piece together the narrative and what has happened to the journal writer. And at the same time, she's trying to make progress on a book that she's writing, a different book that she's writing. And the whole time you're reading this story, you're trying to figure out what's real and what isn't real. How much is being written by this, is this young Japanese girl real, or is it a fictional construction of Ruth the author? Is Ruth the author a fictional construction of the Japanese girl who's writing the diary? I mean, there's just like layers upon layers upon layers in this story. And there's lots of, I would do want to say there are themes of suicide in this book, and the way that suicide is discussed is does not take into account mental health reasons why people would die from suicide. So that, if that's an issue for you, you should just be aware of that before you pick this book up. I really enjoyed the story overall until the last little bit of it, when it kind of went off the rails for me. I think Lindsay described it the same way. it just got nuts with Ruth Ozeki, the actual author, bringing in all this quantum physics stuff, and there's appendices that are supposedly explaining the quantum physics stuff, and it just got way too off in the weeds for me, and I just couldn't. It lost me. And so I did not particularly enjoy how this ended, but up until that point, I did enjoy the story. I would say this is, like one of those middle of the road reads for me. Not an awesome read, but also not a terrible read. So I think there are elements in this that are really, really interesting and exciting to read about. And there's a couple of relationships in this story which I particularly love, particularly the relationship between the young teenage Japanese girl and her grandmother, which was just a beautiful, beautiful story, and I really, really loved it. And I learned a ton about Japanese culture from this book. So that was the last thing I read in May. So May was successful for me in terms of overall reading, but not so successful for me in terms of getting my physical TBR down to a more manageable level. I'm going to be working on that a little bit harder in June. So hopefully, wish me luck, fingers crossed, I can do a little bit better. I hope you've all found something good to read in the month of May, and I will talk to you later.